Welcome back to our panel discussion, How Agencies Are Reducing IT Complexities in a Multi-Cloud World, sponsored by CenturyLink, here on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. My guests today are Alan Hill, Director of Telecommunications at the General Services Administration. Sanjay Gupta is Chief Technology Officer of the Small Business Administration. Stephen Grunch is Branch Chief for Enterprise Cloud Services at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And Zain Ahmed, Vice President and General Manager, Civilian Sales for CenturyLink. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. And before the break, we were talking about some of the interrelated issues of the vast numbers of new products that are launched by cloud providers to enhance their offerings, and also the related need for the technical skill in the government side to be able to deal with all of this. Zain, what are you seeing? Comment on how you bridge that gap.
So we've seen it where CenturyLink has built a robust set of cloud ecosystem partners to put all the solutions set together and keep updated with the technology as it evolves. Not every technology applies to the government, and making sure it applies within the FISMA framework and can be securely evolved and adapted is an important step. Having the rationalization put in place with the right skill set to baseline all the needs of the department and how it meets the mission is an important bridge. And having the expertise to come in and do that. Not every department has the expertise in-house to do it. So bringing a trusted partner is one of the biggest things that makes it a successful program.
Yeah, so in other words, a new service could be a terrific piece of technology from this or that cloud provider, but it could also maybe undo some things that are required for FISMA compliance, or as Sanjay mentioned, it could maybe interrupt some of the calls and interrelationships of applications.
Second, third level interaction that needs to happen within the application itself.
So you need the skill to be able to recognize that, or some kind of way to deal with maybe testing it.
Correct, and we developed this tool called Cloud Application Manager that helps you manage and provides you data analytics behind the scenes as to how your application is performing. It also gives you a bridge into which cloud to send which application to and which workload needs to go where, and gives you a one view of it, because you can also have an opportunity where you just expense too much within the cloud, because if you just send workloads on it without recognizing how much it's going to get billed for, you'll end up with a big bill at the end of the day. So this gives you an opportunity to actually see it before it actually happens and lets you optimize that.
Sure, and Alan, what does the playbook say about, and also I guess the Cloud Smart strategy just out a few weeks ago as this airs, with respect to inculcating new technology services coming from cloud providers that spiffy, but it's got to work in your environment?
Well, looking at the playbook and looking at the strategy and focusing on the workforce, one agency's focusing on the types of training to bring up the skill sets of their staff. But going back, as you mentioned and Zain mentioned, the technology is changing too fast. And so it's important that's why at GSA we built managed security services, so that as these technologies are changing, that they actually, our industry partners have the skills to manage these complex tools in a complex environment. Going from a traditional security model, and myself, my background is in security, and it's a lot more complex today than it was 10 years ago. And staying compliant with NIST standards, the NIST requirements, is not an easy path. And it's important to partner with industry partners who have the skills to help augment your government staff to where you have gaps.
Yeah, that's a good point. NIST has had extensive guidance on cybersecurity writ large, and also cybersecurity for mobility, cybersecurity for cloud environments. And Sanjay, do you find that you have the ability now in the agency to evaluate these products, because you don't want to let something go by that might be good or use something that's not going to be so good? How do you do that?
It's a challenge, like we had talked earlier, Tom. And I want to just kind of piggyback to the part about the comment Alan made and you made about, the cloud is a paradigm change. And what that means is a lot of the forces, the skilled workforce you have, has to reorient themselves to think in the cloud. The boundaries have changed. It is more abstract. It is more amorphous. So one of the things we are doing and I'm doing at the SBA is simplifying things. Because like we say in the technology world, it's easier to make things complex, but it's more difficult to simplify. So one of the factors we are focused on is how do you simplify things. And I'll give you a quick instance like I was referencing earlier. So I laid out a cybersecurity vision to protect all of IT assets within the SBA, regardless of where they sit, meaning if they're on premises, in a cloud, any type of cloud, whether they're mobile devices, and we're using one uniform way to manage, monitor, track, and secure all of our IT assets. So in other words, we've simplified the way we are managing our IT environment and protecting our IT environment. And we've deployed these series of tools which are in the cloud, so they are scalable as much as we need them to be. And it allows us to now monitor and manage the entire environment. So that's the model we've adopted. That's the model which is actually enabling SBA to not only meet the objectives that are set out by some of the guidelines, but in fact, we have been able to inform policies like the TIC, the Trusted Internet Connections, which was laid out, in 2007 or so. We were able to challenge the status quo, if you will, and be able to demonstrate how we could meet the intent and the goals of the Trusted Internet Connections. I just recently completed a similar pilot, a 90-day pilot for the CDM modernization again, the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program by DHS. It was not designed to be in the cloud, so working with the DHS CDM team, we've been showing how we can meet the objectives that the CDM program had laid out in the cloud. So it's been a challenge, but at the same time, we are all about challenging the status quo and being able to demonstrate how we can not only protect the SBA, but also help the rest of the federal government understand a model that they can adopt. So that's what we've been doing.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you have a policy that there shall be CDM
Right.
and continuous monitoring and diagnostics, and there shall be use of a TIC, a trusted internet connection, then by extension, that has to be the case in the cloud as more and more assets move there.
Yep, absolutely. And that's what we've demonstrated, and there's more on our target list for coming in the future.
Steve, that's what you found also?
Obviously, we do use the TIC for traffic coming into our environment. We're fully compliant with the federal guidelines on how to move traffic in and out of our cloud environment. I would say more specifically, though, one of the problems that we run into is evaluating new services that are offered by cloud providers. I think the other panelists have touched on this as well. We leverage the FedRAMP program pretty extensively for new services that are offered. That is part of our process in which we evaluate services that are going to be used by different development teams. I think the other thing that we look at within our organization is this idea of immutable security, or security as code, if you will. We try to put the security components of the applications that we develop really early on in the process. And so in terms of approving or baking in security into our environment, we're approving the process of which applications or code is put into the cloud. Okay, when a team decides which services it's going to use and which pipeline it's going to use to put that code into the cloud, our security team has evaluated that and approved that. Okay, so once that's done, once the process is approved and the pipeline to get the code into the cloud environment is approved, then we can focus on changes to that pipeline rather than each individual product that's involved with it.
Yeah, so there's kind of a theme here I'm hearing, and that is having kind of a reference situation against which you can measure some of these new services, whether it's in security or in connectivity to other applications, whatever the situation might be. And so, Zane, is that what you're seeing in general, is that agencies, hey, look, great service, run it through FedRAMP first, or great service, test it against my security posture and my security as code, for example, first, then we'll consider it.
Definitely, we're seeing FedRAMP being used a lot more, and the other framework like FISMA is always applicable, right? And we're doing it for a pretty large agency where we're deployed a FISMA monitored kind of environment for them and has all the security checks and balances, because if that's a minimum criteria to get and solve a problem for the mission and be applicable within the cloud environment. There are three main things you need to be able to do. One is you should be able to do multi-cloud orchestration. Second is you need to be able to show where the workloads need to go and manage that from a cost perspective and be able to provide one single kind of interface. And third is ability to manage multiple cloud services.
Well, that goes with the orchestration on one end and then managing it on the other end. And yeah, so the idea of this single interface to many multiple resources, would that also include the data center that the agency still operates?
Absolutely. And in fact, as agencies move to a hybrid cloud, it's important to understand the network aspect and the security aspect. Cloud is not coming from a single source anymore. It's coming from multiple points. There's multiple vectors as we become more wireless. So it's important to create a network that is a hybrid network that supports cloud environment. The way the network works for a traditional network does not work for cloud environment. So it's important to create a hybrid network that supports your cloud providers at the same time to support your data center. Software-defined networking is becoming extremely more important in cloud environment and how the application gets delivered to the customer. And in addition, leveraging things like SD-WAN so that you can lower that cost associated with having a multi-cloud environment. It's important to, as agencies move forward in the modernization of their infrastructure, both from a security and a network perspective, that they take in and use the types of technologies out there that is ideal for a cloud environment, but also supports your legacy data centers.
Yeah, so Sanjay, what is your approach to that multi-environment and multi-factor, if you will, for lack of a better word, management element? Because you've got to manage the movement of things to the cloud, the orchestration, the startup, maybe manage things among commercial clouds, which gets really complicated, and then the interplay between maybe the same application in your data center and also in cloud instances or multiple cloud instances with the same vendor. We've talked about cybersecurity. Clearly, you have to manage what's happening there and know about it, and also as we said, the orchestration. What are the other elements of management? I mean, for example, ongoing performance management.
Right. So we are looking at the SBA in a uniform manner, and we're being cloud agnostic, if you will. Now, it's easier said than done, obviously. We're trying to look at one set of tools which manage all things in multiple clouds. So for starters, we made a decision early on that we are going to limit ourselves to 2 major clouds. And so our cloud footprint is largely limited to those 2 major cloud service providers. But we're deploying tools, we're deploying processes, we're making solutions that span those different clouds. Like I was talking earlier about cybersecurity, we're not limiting ourselves only to the cloud environment, but also to our on-premises environment. So governance, somebody mentioned earlier, we're trying to implement a governance policy and a processes and a framework which will allow us to manage all assets that belong in, regardless of which environment they belong in. I'll give you a simple example about cost management. Cost management in the cloud is a very important aspect. And often it doesn't get the attention that's needed till something happens which catches your attention, if you know what I'm saying there. So one of the things we're looking at is we're trying to make sure that we are managing
anti-deficiency mode or something.
There you go. Yeah. So we're looking at ensuring that we are looking at cloud on a pay-as-you-go model, which means that simply you turn it off and you're not using it. Say, as example, on weekends or evenings, if you do not need to use the services, you turn them off, so you're not paying for them. But when you need to use them, you turn them on, if you will. And it's as simple as switching on and off a light switch in a room. So we're trying to ensure we have that kind of a discipline because we're being prudent about how we are using our resources there. Another aspect on the cloud environment is the fact that we are, like I said earlier, we're managing within 2 major cloud footprints. We're ensuring we do not have cloud sprawl because it's easy to have cloud sprawl by going into multiple cloud footprints. And that is a problem in of itself. And so we're being very protective of the fact that we need to ensure our cloud footprint is in 2 major cloud providers. And if we need to ensure that there's a 3rd cloud provider, there'll need to be a very strong business case in effect for us to be considering that. Because that's how we're managing it.
Even if it's in only 2 providers, it could be in multiple instances.
Exactly correct. Yes, even that's true. And even in the some of the clouds you have, there are the gov cloud, there's a commercial cloud, then there is all variations even within the cloud. So yes, it starts becoming very complex very quickly.
Yeah, and Zaid, that usage and pay for model, the convergence of what are we paying for, what are we using, because what are we using has to do with performance and capacity as well as cost. And so these things can get to look like the world's biggest cell phone bill, of yesteryear. So is that part of the management complex that you can bring in to help agencies manage that interface?
Absolutely. This is a big piece of it where we look at the data analytics behind it and feed the cost algorithm into this tool, and it smartly tells you where to go or turn off something that's billing and it's not being utilized at all. So it gives you the advanced analytics that you can see through to make the right decision. And it's all about managing data these days, right? Data is the biggest asset that you have. And this tool gives you the algorithms as well as the machine learning capabilities to predict what you're going to be doing next year, or even kind of next move for your workload to go into. Because as you were saying, like cell phone bills of yesteryears, your roaming is on. And your bill can go out the roof. So having a smart way to monitor and manage your cloud applications as well as your workloads is the right way to go.
And I imagine you could generate reports such that you have an independent analysis of what your usage was that you can present to the cloud provider and saying, well, wait a minute, Tuesdays from midnight to 6 a.m., this was never running.
Correct. It gives a good audit tool, but also it gives you an ability to forecast budget, right? There's not a infinite amount of budget in any agency, and you're able to predict something when you go in a usage-based model is key. So as you're turning things on, turning things off, it reminds you, gives you that ability to go manage that at that level.
Okay, saving money, good place to take a break. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin, here on the panel discussion, How Agencies Are Reducing IT Complexities in a Multi-Cloud World, sponsored by CenturyLink, here on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.